In the early 2000s, Murder Inc. wasn't just a label, it was a dynasty. Ja Rule was everywhere. Every radio station, every club, every MTV countdown. From Always on Time to Livin' It Up, he wasn't just making hits, he was the hit. He had the charisma of Tupac, the melodies of R&B, and the swagger of a man who knew he'd already made it. And behind the curtain, Irv Gotti, label founder, executive producer, and street-certified visionary. A man who took the raw energy of the streets and fused it with radio-friendly hooks and chart-topping finesse. He wasn't chasing culture, he was culture. Murder Inc. had cracked the code, pairing gangsta rap grit with R&B seduction. It was the formula that took Ja Rule and Ashanti to the top of the Billboard charts, again and again. Ashanti's voice brought softness, Ja's verses brought edge, and Irv brought the vision. By 2002, they were unstoppable. Ja Rule had 6 top 10 singles in a single year. Ashanti's debut album sold over 500,000 copies in its first week. Murder Inc. had multiple platinum records, a distribution deal with Def Jam, and Irv Gotti had earned a reputation as one of the most powerful men in hip-hop. They weren't just a label, they were a movement. They had the industry in a chokehold. Music videos were cinematic. Album releases felt like events. Even their logo, 2 smoking guns, became synonymous with success. But what most people didn't know was that storm clouds were already forming. Inside the industry, whispers began. Whispers about Ja Rule's authenticity. Whispers about Irv's ties to street figures, specifically Kenneth Supreme McGriff, a known drug kingpin from Queens. Still, the success kept stacking. Murder Inc. wasn't just dominating, they were changing the sound of an entire era. Even artists like Jennifer Lopez, Fat Joe, and Mary J. Blige tapped into the Murder Inc. formula. Irv Gotti had influence that stretched far beyond his label. He wasn't just a producer, he was a gatekeeper. The kind of person who could make or break careers with a phone call. And Ja Rule? He was riding high, private jets, sold-out arenas, A-list features. He went toe-to-toe with Jay-Z and DMX on It's Murda and held his own. But in 2003, something shifted. Another name started bubbling up. An artist from Queens who didn't sound like Ja. He sounded like Trouble, 50 Cent. And he wasn't coming alone. Murder Inc. was the king of the charts. But then came a mixtape assassin with a bulletproof vest and a vendetta. And Ja Rule's world was about to change forever. The 50 Cent War begins. If Murder Inc. was the empire, 50 Cent was the rebellion. In 2003, he dropped Get Rich or Die Tryin', and hip-hop changed overnight. Backed by Eminem and Dr. Dre, 50 didn't just arrive, he detonated. But his war with Murder Inc. started long before the album. Years earlier, 50 had already fired warning shots with a gritty underground track called How to Rob. It was satirical, sure, but it made enemies. Fast. Then came Your Life's on the Line. Then Wanksta. But this wasn't just rap beef. It got physical. In March 2000, 50 Cent and Murder Inc. affiliates clashed at the Hit Factory recording studio in Manhattan. According to reports, Irv Gotti and Ja Rule were present. A fight broke out. Curtis Jackson, aka 50, was allegedly stabbed during the altercation. Court documents later revealed that blackjack handles and knives were involved. Blood was spilled, but no one went down. 50 didn't retreat. He reloaded. He built G-Unit from the ground up, Lloyd Banks, Tony Yayo, Young Buck, and positioned himself as the anti-Ja. Where Ja sang hooks, 50 snarled verses. Where Murder Inc. shimmered, G-Unit stomped. And fans responded. Get Rich or Die Tryin' sold 872,000 copies in its first week. It was raw. It was aggressive. It was everything Murder Inc. wasn't. And suddenly, what once felt like dominance began to feel dated. In interviews, 50 Cent accused Ja Rule of being fake. He mocked his sing-song style. He questioned his street credibility. It wasn't just music, it was marketing warfare. And Irv Gotti? He saw the threat coming. Behind the scenes, Irv allegedly tried to shut down 50's rise before it gained steam. Rumors of blackballing began to swirl. Calls to radio stations, pressure on club promoters, even tensions at Def Jam. Some said DJs were warned, play 50 and lose Murder Inc. exclusives. Some said club owners were told to cancel 50's appearances or risk retaliation. But it was too late. 50 had the streets. He had Eminem and Dr. Dre. He had momentum. And Ja Rule? He was suddenly the punchline. Radio DJs flipped. Mixtape DJs turned. The public perception had shifted. And Murder Inc., once untouchable, was now bleeding. Ja Rule was the prince of rap love songs. But in 2003, that love turned to blood. And 50 Cent wasn't just taking Ja's spot, he was coming for his legacy. The Fed raid. By 2003, Murder Inc. was already under pressure. 50 Cent had flipped the industry. G-Unit was climbing the charts. And Ja Rule, once untouchable, was now fighting off memes, mockery, and declining sales. But the real threat wasn't another rapper. It was the federal government. For years, whispers had swirled about Irv Gotti's connections to Kenneth Supreme McGriff, a convicted drug lord and former leader of the Supreme Team, one of the most feared crime syndicates in Queens during the 1980s. McGriff had reportedly cleaned up his image. On paper, he was seen around music video sets. He had a production company. But federal investigators believed otherwise. They suspected Supreme was funneling drug proceeds into Irv's label. Money laundering, hidden behind record deals, shell companies, and production budgets. And in January 2003, the government made its move. Federal agents raided the Murder Inc. offices in Manhattan. At sunrise, black SUVs rolled up to 825 8th Avenue. Dozens of agents swarmed the office floors with jackets labeled FBI and IRS. They carried out boxes. They seized hard drives. They walked out with contracts, servers, financial ledgers, even Irv's personal computer. News helicopters circled overhead. And just like that, Murder Inc. was no longer a label. It was a federal crime scene. The media exploded. CNN, MTV News, The New York Times. Headlines labeled Irv and Ja as part of a criminal enterprise. Reporters questioned whether Murder Inc. was a legitimate business or just a front. Def Jam, their distributor, went quiet. Internally, label execs began debating whether to drop Murder Inc. altogether. Brand deals vanished overnight, radio play cooled, and artists, once eager to collaborate, suddenly backed off. Irv Gotti, defiant as ever, held a press conference just days later. "I'm not part of no criminal activity. I'm not hiding anything. This is just another way of holding a successful black man down." He denied any wrongdoing, called Supreme a family friend, said the government was trying to tear down what he'd built. But the feds weren't done. Wiretaps, bank statements, surveillance logs. They wanted Irv. They wanted his brother Chris. And most of all, they wanted to prove Murder Inc. wasn't just making music. They were moving money. By the end of 2003, the label was unraveling. They built an empire out of beats and hooks. But the feds weren't listening to music. They were listening to wiretaps. The collapse. By 2004, the Murder Inc. machine was breaking down. The hits slowed, the confidence cracked, and the world that once cheered for Ja Rule was now laughing. New York, his 2004 single featuring Fat Joe and Jadakiss, was meant to be a comeback. It had the grit, the defiance, the old swagger. But it didn't land like it used to. The charts didn't move the way they once had. The public had made its decision. They were done with Ja Rule. The streets had moved on to G-Unit. Mixtapes, clothing lines, vitamin water deals. 50 Cent was everywhere. And Ja, he was trying to survive. Every release was met with criticism. Every video flooded with wanksta jokes. Every interview turned into damage control. Late-night hosts mocked him. DJs aired parodies. Even the fans turned into critics. Murder Inc. was still standing, but barely. And inside the label, the pressure was mounting. Ashanti was still a star. Her 2002 debut had gone triple platinum. But now she was making moves of her own. New management, new sound. Less Irv whispers turned into headlines. Was there friction? Was she next to leave? In interviews, Irv brushed it off. "That's family," he'd say. "She's always going to be Murder Inc." But behind the scenes, tensions flared. Ashanti was tired of the legal cloud, tired of the blackballing, tired of being tied to a label that seemed more criminal case than creative hub. Meanwhile, the Gotti brothers were locked in court battles. They weren't charged yet, but the feds weren't backing off. The IRS froze assets. Business deals were canceled. Studio budgets dried up. Even loyal insiders began jumping ship. Producers, publicists, street teams. Irv tried everything. He rebranded the label as The Inc., dropped the murder to soften the image, new logos, new strategy. But it was too late. The name was tainted. Radio didn't want it. TV didn't want it. Even Def Jam started hinting at severing ties. And for the first time, Irv Gotti, the man who once held the industry in his palm, was powerless. He wasn't feared. He wasn't praised. He was under investigation and under pressure. And Irvy, he looked tired. In interviews, he tried to act unfazed, but his eyes told a different story. This wasn't just a label collapsing, it was a legacy unraveling. They tried to change the name, reinvent the sound. But you can't rebrand a broken empire. And the verdict was coming. Verdict and aftermath. In 2005, the federal case finally hit the courtroom. Irv and Chris Gotti were indicted on charges of money laundering, accused of funneling over $1 million in drug money from Kenneth Supreme McGriff through Murder Inc. The trial was massive. 9 weeks, over 30 witnesses, wiretaps, financial records, surveillance. The prosecution painted Murder Inc. as a criminal enterprise. The defense said it was all hype, music industry politics blown out of proportion. And when the verdict came in, not guilty. The Gotti brothers walked free, smiles, hugs, relief. But it was a hollow victory, because by then, the empire was already gone. Ja Rule's reign was over. His albums stopped charting. His presence faded from TV, radio, and public relevance. Ashanti cut ties. Quietly, respectfully, but permanently. She pursued her own projects, new labels, new producers. No more Inquisitor Irv tried to restart the machine. He launched a reality show, tried signing new acts, gave interviews about betrayal, about 50 Cent, about being misunderstood. "They tried to bury me," he said, "but I'm still standing." But the industry had moved on. The sound had changed. The audience had shifted. And the Murder Inc. brand was radioactive. There were no more anthems, no more award shows, just echoes. Legacy? It's complicated. For a few years, Murder Inc. was the sound of hip-hop. They created classics. They defined an era. They changed the way rap and R&B collided, but they also burned fast and fell hard. The 50 Cent beef, the federal raid, the internal fractures. It all led to the same ending. No one artist, no one raid, no one moment, just pressure. And over time, even the mightiest brands buckle under pressure. In the end, Murder Inc. didn't die in court. It died in the hearts of the fans, in the silence of the charts, in the space where momentum used to live. It wasn't a bang, it was a fade. A name once shouted from stages, now just a chapter in history. Legacy lost,